Welcome back, everybody. Episode 8 of the Mariners Deep Dive podcast. And if you can't tell already, we're here on YouTube as well as on Spotify. So if you're listening to the audio version of this on Spotify, make sure to check us out on YouTube, where we will be recording now more often for audio quality purposes, as you can see by the headphones, but also because people like YouTube. And, some people would consider podcast to be out of touch. So here we are on YouTube catching up with the new hit trends. And also you can see our beautiful faces and Jake's serial killer goggles and his college dorm room and my bedroom here with the with the Mariners backdrop. We both got Mariners jerseys on. Jake, whose jersey do you got on there?
France, baby.
Ty France jersey there. I got a JP Crawford jersey on, spring training cap from a couple of seasons ago. That was, of course, was the COVID shortened season. But we're back here today, and we will now be recording these episodes as well as our football deep dive podcast episodes. So make sure you go check those out on Spotify and YouTube as well. Those will all be here on YouTube as well. So check it out, and make sure you check out the Twitter at M's Deep Dive Pod and the Instagram at Mariners Deep Dive Podcast, where we will be much more interactive on Instagram, posting and sharing cool stuff and like polls and questions and whatnot to interact when we're not recording podcasts. Check that out as well. But we're going to get right into the action. Free agency is a whirlwind right now. Spring training. We're recording right now 12:13 a.m. on a Friday morning because we were trying to get sound stuff figured out. But now that we got it figured out, here we are recording, and spring training officially starts today. The Mariners play a spring training game tomorrow against the San Diego Padres. San Diego Padres. For some reason, I was thinking they switched like the Chargers to LA, but they did. Still in San Diego. So San Diego Padres. Marco Gonzalez will be getting the start, so you'll get to see some guys. I don't know if some of the new guys will be there, but we will see. So all good stuff. So it's right around the corner. There's 3 spring training games today, and we're getting this stuff out to you before that spring training game. So we're going to start, as always, with some MLB news. Obviously, MLB free agency is going on, and if the Mariners are going to be contenders, they will be facing a lot more of these teams potentially down the road. So we're going to talk about all these big moves, but very briefly, we just want to cover some of these bigger free agent moves. So the one that just came out, well, the San Francisco Giants just signed Matthew Boyd, the former Tigers pitcher. So that just happened. But the big one that just came out, Freddie Freeman, the Braves first baseman, former Braves first baseman, everyone thought maybe they'd bring back. Well, he ends up hitting free agency, and they make a move that we'll talk about in a second. And now the Dodgers signed Freddie Freeman to a 6-year, $162 million contract. And I set for us to talk about later, the potential of the MLB needing a salary cap, because the Dodgers lineup is completely unfair, honestly, at this point, and their pitching rotation is also insane. And they are spending so much money. They're spending at least over 300 million at this point. So an insane amount of money, insane lineup. But yeah, I mean, we'll see if they choke in the NLCS again. So Freddie Freeman, 6 years, 162. This is a big one. What do you think of all this?
I hate it. I just hate it. I mean, you're paying. Okay, let me just read some of the 26 man. Oh, here we go. Total payrolls for every MLB team. Here's the top 3. You got the Mets at $249 million, the Yankees at 241, the Dodgers at 231. The next highest is 184, which is the Padres. And then you get down to like league average. League average is $122 million. You find the Mariners at number 20. We only spend $89 million.
Yep. Bargain ball, baby.
Then you get to team number 30, and it's the Orioles at $30 million. So, huge discrepancies. Like
it's
just insane how you think you can have a fair league when, one team spends over 200 million more dollars on players than, most teams. Like league average, you're spending almost 100 million more dollars, and $100 million, and this is year by year salary. $100 million gets you like four really good players. So, you know, you don't you don't see this in the NFL or the NBA.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know,
It's a bargain ball league for the Mariners. And honestly, you look at it and it's like, you think a lot of people have proposed a salary floor to get teams that don't spend very much to spend more. But it's like, yeah, maybe that'll help the league be more competitive for bad teams. But that doesn't mean that that definitely won't stop the Dodgers from being the most loaded team every single year. And honestly, I mean, it is pretty funny how the Dodgers are like never winning it, even though they're always there. The Mets still suck, even though they spend all this money, and the Yankees still never win anything, even when they spend all this money. But nonetheless, it's like if you don't put a salary cap on it, then you find the difference. Like in the NBA, there's a difference in markets, which changes stuff. But like in the NFL, it's like even in difference in markets, players will still go to teams because teams that are bad have more money. That's the way it should be, because then the teams that are bad can spend money on players to be more competitive. But in the MLB, the teams that are bad have less money, and because the better you are, the more money you can make. The Dodgers in 2014 signed a $100 million TV deal. That is the reason why they've gone on this huge stretch. And then they're just in such a gigantic market in LA that they can spend all the money they want. And there's probably some Hollywood actor that's paying like $50 million for them to sign Freddie Freeman this year, honestly. So it's pretty ridiculous, honestly. But I don't know. I liked Freddie Freeman. I don't really like him that much anymore. I lost a lot of respect for him for this move. Me and my buddy were comparing him to Kevin Durant the other day because even though he didn't lose to the team before he went to them, it's kind of like, okay, buddy. But I mean, the Braves didn't want to resign him anyways. They made a move that we'll talk about in a minute, but we'll cruise through a few here. Jock Peterson goes to the Giants, 1 year, $6 million. Donovan Solano to the Reds, 1 year, 4.5. Royals signed Zach Greinke to a 1 year, $13 million, which makes no sense because they suck. Royals also acquire Amir Garrett in exchange for Mike Minor and cash considerations from the Reds, who are dwindling. But the Royals are making some interesting moves. Amir Garrett's a nice piece, though. Braves re-sign Eddie Rosario, 2 years, $18 million. Tigers get Andrew Chafin, 2 years, 13. They're building a nice team, and he came from the A's, so another loss for the Athletics. Braves signed Colin McHugh, two for 10. Yankees signed Rizzo back for 232, so that's an important one. And then Rockies, here's the next big one. Rockies signed Chris Bryant, 7 years, $182 million. So they trade Nolan Arenado for pocket change and Austin Gomber. They don't re-sign him. And then they sign Chris Bryant to 182. Makes a ton of sense, right, Jake? This totally makes so much sense, right?
yeah, I mean, they're really competing this year. I'm interested. I don't see any connections with Chris Bryant and anything to do with Colorado, anything to do with the Rockies. He's a Chicago for life guy. He goes to the Giants, is not his choice really. And then he goes to Colorado.
Yeah, I mean,
There's no Trevor Story. There's no, you got Herman Marquez. He's solid. That's your only like good pitcher. And name one good hitter on that team.
so here's the thing with the Rockies. They were like really good at home for some reason. They were like a playoff team at home, but they like have some pieces, but they lose John Gray. They have Austin Gomber, who's okay. And then they have like Herman Marquez, who's pretty solid. But like on offense, they do have CJ Crone, who's pretty good. So you put that with Chris Bryant, and then you got Jonathan Daza, who is one of the best batting averages, and Ryan Tapia also. And then you add like their catcher, who I can't remember the name of, and they like have some contact mixed with power. The problem is their bullpen is atrocious. The back end of their rotation is really bad, even though they have Kyle Freeland and Senzatella. But I mean, honestly, they could have like a decently average team, but they're not going to contend. And they don't have like a good farm system or anything like that. They didn't trade, they didn't get like a bunch of prospects for Arenado or for Story. They get a first round pick as soon as Story signs because if they by letting him go, they're going to get a first round pick by him signing because it's like the last year of the draft compensation going on. So
But
that will
wait,
happen.
what what if Trevor Story hates the Rockies so much he sits out an entire season to deny them a first round pick next year?
That'd be funny, but I don't think Story would do that because it diminishes value immensely. Nonetheless, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what goes on there in Colorado. The Mariners won't be playing the Rockies this year because they played them last year. Some other moves here. Chris Martin to the Cubs, 1.5. Philly signed Brad Hand, 1 for 6. Brewers signed McCutchen. Giants signed Carlos Martinez. And then a couple of ones to talk about here. So the Yankees traded Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez for Josh Donaldson, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and Ben Rortvet. So just quick thought on that, because in our last episode, we talked about Kiner-Falefa being traded from the Rangers to the Twins in the Mitch Garver trade. So they flip it for Urshela and Gary Sanchez, and apparently they'll play Sanchez at DH this year. Any quick thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that's what Gary Sanchez should be. He's statistically like the worst catcher in the MLB. If you look at, you can watch videos about his framing and all this and why he's terrible. He doesn't give the pitchers a target. He doesn't frame well. He doesn't block well. He doesn't do anything really that well behind the plate.
Yeah.
And then he's been kind of disappointing as a hitter. If you're bad at defense, you better be dang good at offense. And as for Urshela, Yankees fans believe he's the best fielder of all time. He's not. He's okay. He's a good fielder. But honestly, Donaldson, I think he's more consistent on defense than Sanchez. I don't think he's as consistent as Urshela on defense, but I think he's got the upside behind the plate. He was an above average hitter, which Urshela wasn't. And as for Kiner-Falefa, he's arguably, the best defensive shortstop in the league. It depends kind of whether you like JP Crawford as the best defensive shortstop, or guys like Carlos Correa and them. But
Yeah.
I think Kiner-Falefa is a really good fielder, and if there's one thing he does behind the plate is make contact. I believe he was like top 5 in hits last year. He had 271. He's not going to give you home runs, but if you play amazing defense and get hits, like base hits on this Yankees team, that's something they don't have. So
Yep.
I honestly think this is a good move for the Yankees. And I think that the Twins lose the steal.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of agree. I think kind of Falefa has more potential there. So yeah, Twins winning the deal. That was my next question for you. But so next moves here, Nelson Cruz, former Mariner, but not recent enough to go in that category. Signs with the Nationals, 1 for 13. And this kind of starts the trend you're looking at here. I heard today that the Orioles apparently have offered Carlos Correa a 10-year, $300 million contract, which I would love personally because leads the Astros would be awesome and give the Orioles a chance at winning some games. But some of these teams that are not contending are signing some of these bigger name guys, and bigger name guys are signing with these teams because they can offer more money just because they have no contract. So they can sign like one big name, but they can't sign as many big names like the Dodgers, in case they're confused there. So overall, you look at it and then all of a sudden some of these bad teams have these good players. Yeah, they can flip them in trades, but they're signing some of these guys to bigger deals. And all of a sudden, maybe you're thinking, those rules against tanking, like not being able to be in the lottery for more than 3 years and whatnot, is all of a sudden starting to really show here. Some other moves here. The Phillies signed Kyle Schwarber to a 4-year, $79 million contract. And then the two interesting one, or we talked about the Chris Bryant one because he obviously was on the Mariners radar, so that's not happening. And then Seiya Suzuki, the Japanese star outfielder, left-handed bat, is signing with the Chicago Cubs, 5 years, 70 million. So the Cubs have made some interesting moves. However, he's obviously very unproven because he's coming over from Japan. So in a team that is very sketchy, like the Cubs, if he turns into a stud, Cubs could maybe be decent. However, if he busts, it could be more rough going for those fans there in the Windy City. With that, let's move on to some division moves real quick here. Rangers pick up Greg Holland, Charlie Culberson, and Jake Marisnick to add depth. And the Angels sign Danny Duffy and Cesar Valdez, as well as the Ace claiming Sheldon Noisy. But the moves that you want to hear about, the Athletics got significantly worse yet again. We talked about them trading Chris Bassett in our last episode. And in this episode, we got two big trades. First one is Matt Chapman to the Blue Jays, who needed a third baseman. And now the Blue Jays are looking very, very scary. But they trade Matt Chapman to the Blue Jays for Gunnar Hoglund, Kevin Smith, Zach Logan, Kirby Snead, so a bunch of prospects. And the Blue Jays get the best third baseman in the league. And when he's having a good season, one of the top 10 offensive third basemen in baseball. Of course, he is very inconsistent at times at the plate, but when he is on, he's a very nice bat and has some good power. So Jake, the A's lose another big one. I'll just mention this other one real quick so you can wrap your thoughts up here in a bow. They also trade Matt Olson, the big power lefty bat who hits 40 bombs a year, and last year cut his strikeout percentage down by over 15% and his whiff rate. So now all of a sudden he doesn't even strike out anymore. Also one of the best first basemen defensively in the league. He goes to the Braves, so they fill that Freddie Freeman hole nicely. He could potentially be better than Freddie Freeman even. They trade for Shane Langeliers, Joey Estes, Christian Pache, and Ryan Cusick, so they get a nice haul back. However, they lose a young stud first baseman. And then the Braves signed him to a 8-year, $168 million contract. So that's why they didn't bring Freddie Freeman back. But A's are getting significantly worse here, Jake, which is looking good for the Mariners. The Rangers are stepping up a little bit, which we talked about in our last episode, but the A's significantly worse. You mentioned in the last episode they'd like to play Moneyball, so maybe they'll rally and find something, but starting to look bleak. And they're also mentioned to have Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas in trade talk. So what's going on here with the Athletics?
They're trying to play Moneyball. Getting rid of those expensive contracts, guys who will want money, guys who have money. I think, whoa. Can you hear me correctly?
Yep.
Okay. Something weird's going on with my microphone. Sorry about that. So yeah, the Athletics getting rid of guys who are going to want money, guys who have money. I think that, they're trying to get worse, play Moneyball, hit a rebuild. It's the Athletics, you can question these moves as much as you want, but they've done these moves for forever, getting rid of good players who make a lot of money. And frankly, these players didn't lead to them making the playoffs last year. So it's not like, it's going to hurt them too much. I think this is honestly better for them in the long run. I think guys like Christian Pache, Langeliers, Logue, those are all guys who will be contributors in the next 2 to 3 years. So I'm not too, I think the Athletics made the right move. Honestly, it's good for Mariners fans because makes it a whole lot easier to win the division. It's a little scary because the Blue Jays are getting scary and they're in our division. not our division, our conference, league, whatever you want to call it. They got Matt Chapman. He's good defensively. The question is, what offensive Matt Chapman are you going to get? The really scary thing is apparently they're in trade talks to get Jose Ramirez as well. I've seen reports about that. So if they're able to go get Jose Ramirez, that team looks insane offensive wise. Obviously, defense and pitching is kind of their biggest issue. So I don't know why they didn't address that, because they have one of the most dangerous offenses already. Obviously, they addressed defense in Chapman, but they didn't really address, the bullpen, which was a really big issue. I don't think they approached that as well as they could have. They obviously added some pitchers like Gosman, but yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Blue Jays, Mariners, and then the Yankees and the Astros and the White Sox. It's going to be a tough league in the AL this year. But I think, the Mariners are setting themselves up to be able to compete with these teams.
Yeah, for sure. Gonna be a tough league. And I mean, the only reason Blue Jays can make these trades is Jose Ramirez hasn't been paid yet. Chapman hasn't been paid yet. A lot of these guys are still waiting. And Shet and Gurriel, that is Lourdes, and all these guys, they haven't been paid yet. So they don't have all these huge contracts on their team yet. Nonetheless, we got some former Mariners real quick. Sean Doolittle, who was on the team last year for a brief period, signs back with the Nationals to a minor league deal. And Mariner legend Daniel Vogelbach signs with the Pittsburgh Pirates on a minor league deal. He really didn't have any room on the Mariners, so don't act like we could have re-signed him. But Daniel Vogelbach goes to the Pirates, which is pretty much the place where you go to try and have a good year and hopefully bump up your value, or you go there to die. So we'll see what happens to Daniel Vogelbach. Rooting for him, and go Pirates, I guess. They got a young core with Vogelbach now. But now let's get into the good stuff. Mariners stuff here. We do have Mariners news from free agency. So we'll start off with the small stuff. Mariners have signed 3 minor league contracts and invited these players to spring training. Second baseman Forrest Wall, catcher Chance Sisco, and first baseman Mike Ford, who is a former Rule 5 draft pick of the Mariners. And I mean, hold on, let me look at these guys real quick. I'm just gonna put this one up here real quick. We're gonna bump this up, and there it is. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at these guys real quick, just because I know you care a lot. Chance Sisco is an interesting guy because he, as a catcher, was a former top prospect, as you can see here with Baltimore. He was kind of like Adley Rutschman before Adley Rutschman, and he came up and everybody was excited, and he's a pretty good defensive catcher too, but he's just never gotten it going with the offense. You see the numbers just falling off here, and I didn't even know he was with the Mets last year, but now he's on the Mariners, so some catcher depth. But of course, I mean, Torrens is not a defensive catcher, so if we ever needed extra help with the defense, if there was an injury to Murphy or to Raleigh, Chance Sisco could definitely be an option there. And then the other fella, which is Mike Ford, here has been with the Yankees before, and then obviously former Rule 5 draft pick Mariners, but he never actually played with the Mariners. You see with the Yankees, he was actually not half bad back in 2019, 12 home runs, 25 RBIs, as well as a 259 batting average. But just the last 2 years, it's just been simply atrocious. So, I mean, a few minor league signings, they'll go to spring training. It'll be fun to watch them there. They'll probably play in AAA for most of the season. Yeah, I mean, there they are. I mean, Mariners are already invited other players to spring training. But the move that everybody's here for, the big move that I have been posting all over our Instagram page with posts from the players and the new threads and all that good stuff, is the move we made with the Reds, who have been falling apart and making terrible moves with the Mariners, who have been swindling them. Jerry Dipoto wins again, continues to make fantastic trades. Mariners have now officially acquired Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez, an outfielder and a third baseman, from the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for Justin Dunn, Jake the Rake Fraley, and Brandon Williamson, as well as a player to be named later who is apparently around the 20 range in the Mariners' top 30 prospects. So you could potentially sweeten the package, but right now it's looking really, really, really good for the Mariners. So before we get into the Mariners Hall, we take a quick look here at what the Mariners gave up. So you got Justin Dunn, who is starting to sort of show some promise. He came over in a trade with the Yankees a few years ago, and you see he's still very young. Last year, he made the most starts of his career. He actually had a 3.75 ERA and was starting to look decent. Still had walk issues. You see, and he struck out a little bit more. So he's having one of his better years, better ERA plus, better FIP, obviously. He's been improving steadily, and I think he could really be a nice impact arm with the Reds, but he was injured most of last season, so that helped. And we also still have a loaded farm system with arms like George Kirby and Matt Brash and Emerson Hancock and whatnot. And a nice top of the rotation, obviously, with Robbie Ray in there now. And of course, Marco and Logan Gilbert and all those guys. So it'll be interesting to watch him on the Reds. But, you know, I mean, hopefully he has success over there. He probably will be one of the better pitchers now, other than Luis Castillo. But definitely a piece that I don't feel bad about giving up too much, even though he's a great guy. And then, of course, our buddy, Jake the Rake Fraley. Not literally our buddy, but one of our favorite players, who Jake, by the way, last year called a walk-on against the Giants
Opening
first
day.
series of the season. Still very young as well, too. You see, not a great hitter with 210 batting average, only 9 home runs, but he's got that on base up at 352. He walks a lot. Had some injuries last year, played good defense, but overall, you know, up and down, kind of replaceable level, fourth level outfielder. And when you get a bat like Jesse Winker, which we'll talk about in a second, it's worth it. So, Jake, we get rid of Justin Dunn, we get rid of Jake Fraley, and Brandon Williamson. In case you don't know who he is, he's one of the Mariners' top prospects. He's actually a top 100 prospect on some boards, 83 on Baseball America. A nice, like, really tall left-handed arm who had some potential, but we got still plenty of guys in our farm system. So you look at this haul that we gave, or the haul of players we gave away. Any of these guys are going to miss more than others. And how do you feel personally about this move, about what we gave away?
Well, I'm gonna miss Jake Fraley. He was honestly one of my favorite players on the Mariners last year. I probably would have bought a Jake Fraley jersey. But you know, there's nothing I love more than watching Jake Fraley go up and get a walk. Justin Dunn, you know, he didn't play enough for me to really like get into him as a Mariner. It was kind of like he would be there, he'd be okay, and then he'd be gone for the rest of the year. But and the prospect Williamson, I have no attachment to him. I think is worth it in this trade to give up a top 100 prospect in order to, you know, win now. We've been asking for it. Buy in, win now. So yeah, I really like this move. The only thing that this move does for me negatively is it affects our rotation, which we really haven't addressed. You know, we have Flexen, Gilbert, Marco, and Robbie Ray. And then after that, we have Justice Sheffield, Nick Margevicius.
No, we don't even have him anymore, by the way.
Weird. He's on the Mariners 40-man he's on the Mariners roster right now.
Are you sure? I don't know. He
On the
could be,
website.
but I haven't seen a move about it.
Either way, we have very poor options for that fifth rotation spot. Sheffield, you know, I don't know what happened. He just wasn't good last year. And I don't want to gamble on him, you know, being good. I think we need to add another left-handed pitcher now, whether it's through a trade or a free agency signing. But, you know, this trade for me, we give up some young guys, go get guys who can help us win now. So as for what we gave up, I really like it.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Mariners have still been rumored to be looking for a arm, left-handed arm.
yeah,
I think that when you look at that fifth rotation option, we'll talk about this stuff more when we do some later episodes, like the season prediction and whatnot, and spring training recap. I think, and especially since this technically doubles as our spring training preview episode, one of the things we're going to be looking more forward to, or I'm going to be looking forward to, is who does step up in that fifth role. You mentioned Sheffield, Mark Gavicius, but then you got guys like Matt Brash, who almost came up last year. You got a guy like George Kirby. Emerson Hancock's hurt right now, but you got plenty of other pitchers in there like Levi Stout and some other guys that are really top prospects, really solid prospects. Some of them on the edge of the top 100, some of them in the top 100, like Kirby. I think that's why they leave that open, because they expect them to come up this year, and will they want to contend, they also want those guys to develop, because they know that the top end of their development is higher than a lot of assets that we could acquire. And so while we are trying to start to win now with some of these moves, we are also definitely trying to develop this young talent and make sure that it works out. Because we've had plenty of prospects, but none of them so far have turned into superstars. But man, if some of them do this year, the ceiling of this team is a lot higher than what it looks like right now, because of where some of these young players could potentially end up by the end of the season. And it's like, oh, the Mariners need to fill this, and this. But if some of these young guys develop the right way, then we will be filling that. So that takes us right into the haul that the Mariners received in exchange for what we just talked about them giving up. And so we'll take a quick look at it. So the first guy we're going to talk about is the big one. So Jesse Winker from the Reds. He's only 28 years old. He plays atrocious defense that could definitely see him being a DH. Apparently, they want to give him the opportunity to hit against lefties as well as righties, but this dude rakes off of right-handed pitching, potentially be our DH against right-handers. Terens is there obviously against left-handers, because Jerry Dipoto said Kyle Lewis probably won't be ready to go for the start of the season, contrary to what we mentioned in our last episode, but he changed his mind apparently. You look at his career numbers, you see a 385 career on base, could be a great top of the lineup addition. You look at 24 home runs last year, 305 the batting average. Mariners had the worst batting average in baseball. 71 RBIs, 394 on base, 949 OPS, and 140 OPS. He was one of the best hitters in the game last year, and he's only 28 years old. This is just, it's just, I mean, you look at his projections, projected to be right along those lines. And even if we get this would be excellent, but I think he'll be even better than that, because if you look at him, he improves every single season. I mean, yeah, this is a much smaller sample size. You see, overall, he's getting better every single year, and obviously peaks last year, which is what you want to see. He ends up being an all-star. He ends up 24 months, 71 RBIs, 32 doubles is a number that people don't look at enough. I mean, these numbers are just simply insane, and you can't get over it. And you see, he doesn't even have a big contract right now. So the Mariners really got a steal here with Jesse Winker. So before we get into the second half of this trade, Jake, Jesse Winker, this dude, I mean, is a bat that no one really expected coming into free agency. But now that you have him, I mean, what are your thoughts?
so if you could scroll down for me, go to his stats. The one thing I want to point out is the games played. So he's played no more than 113 games. If you were to play for us and we were to play him every day in the outfield, or we were to play him as a DH, if we increase his amount of games played by, 10, 15, 20, that's another, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 home runs. So this guy's got potential to hit a lot, higher counting stats than he has. So when it says 24 home runs, just know there's home runs just waiting to be hit if he plays a little bit more. I wouldn't mind him playing left field for us. We have one of the best defenses in all of baseball. I think him in left field could be, not too harmful. unless we add, Kyle Lewis. But to start the year, I think he could play left field, um, you know, below average, but it wouldn't hurt us too much. Because I think his bat would be good to have every day. He's not the best against lefties, but I think, a lot of our guys aren't very good against lefties, like Jared Kelenic hasn't hit very well against lefties. You know, it's kind of iffy on the splits on other guys, but I think advanced batting, any splits? I don't see splits, but to me, I think, give him a shot in left field, and if it doesn't work out, you can always move him to DH. But I think he's a great addition to our offense, at least.
He's definitely a great addition to the offense. And if you stick him in left field, I mean, the Mariners last year, their offense was just so bad. And when you look at a team that wins 90 games with the worst statistical offense in baseball, and then you add guys like Jesse Winker, who hits for a high average and gets on base all the time, that's just, think about how many times the Mariners had the bases loaded that if Jesse Winker had come up, we would have actually scored. I mean, it's pretty,
making me mad.
it's pretty mind blowing. So with that, I'm going to move into the second half of what the Mariners received in this trade. If it'll let me. No. Okay, well, everyone just refresh real quick.
Eugenio Suarez.
Page doesn't respond. There we go.
All right.
Eugenio, who for the majority of his career before I learned his real name, thanks to Matt Vasgersian in MLB's show, called him Eugenio, which is, I mean, that's just the way I interpreted it. So take a look at this season for Eugenio. This dude's been playing since 2014. A lot of his years here in Cincinnati. You see, he was an all-star back in 2018 when he had 34 home runs and he hit 283 with a 366 on base. The next year, he was even better than he was. 49 home runs, 271 batting average, 358 on base. See a lot of strikeouts, obviously, which means he led the league in strikeouts, which I know is not good, but that's why you have a bunch of contact hitters around him for a guy that hits 49 home runs, which is insane. But then you take a look, he's obviously falling out. I'm not saying like he's just so great or anything. 202, 198, 312, 286, not great. And you see the high strikeout number still. But the walks, I do want to say this though. For a guy that's had a couple of down seasons, number one, the Reds have been playing him out of position at shortstop, which I don't think people can underestimate the amount that can mess with a guy who's primarily a third base. He's playing third base these years playing shortstop. And you see the offensive numbers are down. I'm not saying it's all that, but it definitely makes a difference. Not playing in position because then you're focusing on the defense more, not on the bat as much. Going back to third base, I think is going to be much more natural for him. He'll play better defense, and he's a power bat at the very least. You stick him in the lineup, he'll hit a bunch of home runs. He's practically like Kyle Seager. If at his worst, he is Kyle Seager because he hits a lot of home runs, drives in a lot of runs, but strikes out a lot and has a low batting average. So at his worst, which is right here last season and the year before, he is pretty much a right-handed Kyle Seager. But if we get the peak of him, which Kyle Seager never had, if we get the peak of Eugenio when he moves back to third, we could be finding a serious diamond in the rough. And this trade will look like one of the biggest fleeces of the century and could propel the Mariners to winning the division and possibly being a serious playoff contender. So I'll let you give your thoughts on Eugenio.
So for me, I don't even need, prime Eugenio. All I need is 2016 Eugenio. Every single stat from 2016, except his 2021 home runs. If he keeps that, 248, hovering around 240, 230, 250, and still hits the home runs, that's like elite for what we need him to do. If he's under 200, obviously that's going to harm our offense quite a bit. I don't want Kyle Seager from last year. Well, that was probably one of the better Kyle Seagers. It didn't help the team too much, like we get in close situations and strike out. If you can count on Eugenio to come up and at least hit a sac fly or hit a double or hit a home run or hit a single to drive a run in, at somewhat of a consistent level around 230, 240, 250. I think that makes his team kind of rise, take that extra step is what I'm trying to say.
For sure. I think that does for a lot of. I'm going to be really interested to seeing spring training what these guys do, especially Eugenio, how he looks to respond at the plate in spring training. And on that note, I'm gonna drop this real quick. The last thing I kind of wanted to get into in this episode is, so spring training's coming up. The Mariners have their first game tomorrow against the Padres. And we mentioned that the fifth starter is definitely up for grabs, kind of like it was last year, there was a battle between Dunn and Sheffield. I want to know, I'll give my own thoughts, but I want to know what you think are some of the things that you are really keying in on here in spring training to pay attention to. For it could be like a position battle, or maybe like a specific player that you want to see how they respond, or a new player that you want to see how they respond. Just any storylines or things that you're really watching for here in spring training for the new season.
Well, one thing I would, if I could share my screen right now, I would. But looking at this current roster, you got some players you want to see a lot out of. Got Matt Brash. He's a guy you want to see a lot out of in spring training. Andres Munoz, he's coming back from that injury, played somewhat well. You want to see a lot out of him. Looks like I can share my screen now. So let me go ahead and share this. All right, you can see me?
Yep.
All right, so we're looking at the active roster right now. So you got Matt Brash, big name you want to see kind of break out in spring training. Obviously, Logan Gilbert, you want to see good things out of. I'm not sure what Ken Giles' status is, but coming off Tommy John, if he's playing in spring training right now, again, I haven't really paid attention to Ken Giles, but if he's looking good in spring training, if he plays, that's good. Andres Munoz, Justice Sheffield, you want to see good things out of. And then obviously you want to see Cal Raleigh play really well. You want to see him take that next step to maybe kind of push Tom Murphy out as the number one catcher. You want to see you want to see the new free agents come in and kind of settle in with the team. And you don't really care too much about seeing them play well, but you want to see Adam Frazier and Eugenio and Jesse Winker, all these guys. You want to see them come in and you want to see them build good relationships with their teammates. If they're looking good, if they're looking happy, if they're enjoying their time in the dugout, on the practice field, in the batting cages, that's a good sign. If they come in and they're just kind of like keeping to themselves and it looks like they're not enjoying the team, something's going on there. And then, of course, you'd like to see Julio Rodriguez, big one. If he explodes in spring training, that lets you know he's probably going to have a chance in the majors, halfway through the season, maybe earlier, especially if there's an injury. And then the last one, Jared Kelenic. He kind of turned it around at the end of the last year, but you want to see him explode in spring training this year. Come out and show people why he was a top prospect and why he should be our center fielder for the future.
For sure. Yeah, so things I'm looking for. There are more guys, by the way, than just the 40-man roster guys that'll be playing in spring training. There have been more guys invited to it. I'm just gonna do this one last time here real quick because you can see right here that in the transaction letter, all these guys are invited to spring training. So guys you don't know, like Jose Caballero, Josh Morgan, Ryan Elias, Jack Larson, all these guys that you don't really know, these guys will be playing a bunch too. So I'm really interested to see how a lot of these guys play because some of them could, maybe they're not earning spots on the roster, but they
Noelvi
could be,
Marte, big one.
for sure. But the ones that like you look at like a Eric Mejia or Zach Deloach or Sam Haggerty or Steven Souza, you look at these dudes that are like right on the brink of being a back end contender to the roster of depth pieces or potential call-ups for injuries. They are more so trying to fight for a spot to be at a place where the front office knows that if there's a spot for them at any point for an injury or somebody struggling, they're at the top of the list in AAA. And so even if their numbers aren't amazing in AAA, they're like pretty good in AAA, they could potentially be like the first guys up that make that impression. And then obviously young dudes you're watching for, looking for that fifth rotation starter. I'm super excited to see a lot of these top prospects like Marte and see if Kelenic can really adjust to major league pitching this year. But man, I'm really excited to see George Kirby because you don't get to see him much. And apparently he has one of the best sliders among all prospects. He probably has the highest graded slider right now. If you look at the right sources, he has the highest graded slider among all pitching prospects in baseball, which is pretty electric. And I really can't wait to see how that, I can't think of the word for some reason, but I want to see how that goes up again, how he goes up against actual major league hitters with that stuff and how it translates. So yeah, I mean, there'll be more things to watch and we'll have episodes within spring training that we can talk about some of this stuff for sure. But as for now, that does it for these big moves. There are still more moves to be made by the Mariners and other teams in free agency. So make sure that you stick around. Thanks for sticking with us through this first experimental YouTube video. We'll be doing this more often and hopefully we'll improve in quality. As always, make sure that you.
Hold on. I got a message. Please don't criticize our camera quality. We know it's bad. We're college students. We can't afford cameras right now, but I promise it will get better eventually. Just be patient.
You didn't want to see our faces that well anyways. We're just here for this. We're just here for the improved sound quality, and because then we can get it to YouTube. But I know I am putting some money aside to invest in like a camera and stuff to try and make this as good as possible. So all the support, sharing it with other people, just even letting someone know about like, hey, I watched this cool YouTube video the other day. It was pretty good. You should check them out. Stuff like that. Or, hey, you should check out the Football Deep Dive podcast on Spotify and not coming on YouTube because it's good stuff if you like the NFL. So you check this stuff out. It's awesome. Thanks for the listens. Really appreciate it. Make sure you follow our Instagram, Mariners Deep Dive Podcast, Twitter, M's Deep Dive Pod. Check out our personal profiles if you want to, but you don't have to. And as always, make sure, because we are being more interactive on the Instagram page. So once again, thank you. Episode 8 is in the book. Spring training's around the corner. And as always, peace out, all of you Mariners fans.